From enchanting islands to some tasty dishes, we're going to take a look at Japanese influences in today's show. Don't go away. Hi, I'm Alan Smith. Welcome to today's show and welcome to my workshop. You know, this time of year when it gets really warm outside, I like to spend some time indoors and do a little indoor gardening. Today we're also going to visit some of the best botanic gardens in America, where we'll see how they're using Japanese gardens in their overall garden design. There's some fascinating uses of symbolism that you'll want to watch for, both in the Chicago Botanic Garden and at the Memphis Botanic Garden. We'll also meet a bonsai expert who'll show us how relatively young trees can take on a very mature look with the use of pruning. And a little later, a chef shows us a recipe that was inspired by our travels today. And one last thing, I'm using some stones out at my new garden, and it might surprise you that after putting so much work into picking out just the right rock for the job, I'm planning to paint these outbuildings. Find out why coming up. I was just spending a little time in some of my garden history books. Very interested in this idea of botanic gardens and their origins. You know, some of the earliest were set up as designated places for plant collections for the purpose of academic study or education, certainly scientific experimentation, and for medicinal uses. One of the earliest botanic gardens I've visited is one in Holland. It's at the University of Leiden. The Leiden Botanic Garden was laid out around 1590, and there the first tulips came. A fellow by the name of Clusius brought them there. This idea of botanic gardens goes way back. The first recorded one was from 340 BC by Aristotle. Now, since then, you can find botanic gardens all across the planet, and some of the best are right here in this country. And they certainly are wonderful centers of learning and beauty. Since today's show is on Japanese influences, I thought we'd take a moment to see how two botanic gardens in the U.S. are using this type of garden in their landscape. This is a beautiful view of the Japanese garden. Now, this is one of the first gardens built here at the Chicago Botanic Garden.
Yes, it is. And we're fortunate to have had such forward-thinking creators of the garden. They took advantage of the 81 acres of water that we have and created the Japanese garden on 3 islands. The third island that you can see at the end here is a sacred place, and it's not walked on. There's a small ramp that goes underwater so that people can go out and maintain the garden, but it's done with great care, and I believe it's to respect the dead. The shrubs are pruned to look like stones, which are symbols of tranquility, I believe, and the trees are pruned to look older and ancient.
Symbolism plays an important role in designing Japanese gardens.
It does, and you can see that in some of the elements that we have. The bridge, the Zen Garden. The Zen Garden is a classic part of Japanese landscape design, and that's what Japanese gardens are all about. It's a symbolism of relating nature, and so that when someone sits in a Zen garden and meditates, they're able to enter that space in nature that we feel in our hearts.
I see. So taking those feelings and that experience and distilling it into those simple, pure forms.
It sounds complicated, but it's really a natural experience, and we do it all the time.
Well, when you walk through that Japanese garden, you certainly sense the tranquility. It really comes through.
It's extremely calming. Just looking out at the view here, and I walk in the morning and walk past this, and it really starts my day in a nice way.
And how about this Japanese garden at the Memphis Botanic Garden? Gina Harris takes us on a tour of this garden and tells us a bit about the symbolism that can be found in its design.
This is our Japanese Garden of Tranquility. It's called Seijaku-in, which translates to Garden of Tranquility. The Japanese garden actually originated from a Chinese garden that has the red bridge. That's where the red bridge came from. And in most Japanese gardens, this would be a really steep one, but ours is not so steep that people can't get over. We also have a zigzag bridge, and the purpose of a zigzag bridge in the Japanese garden is their belief is that you have good kami, or good spirits, and evil kami. And evil kami can only walk in a straight line. So all Japanese gardens have a zigzag bridge because they believe if you cross this, then your evil spirits cannot follow you and they fall off into the water. So you lose your evil spirits when you go through the Japanese garden.
Up next, the art of bonsai, explained by an expert, and a little later, a recipe inspired by Asia. Welcome back. You know, I really get into pruning. Doesn't matter if it's a big project or something small like this, and when it's rosemary or any other aromatic herb, well, it makes the chore even more delightful. I wish you could smell this, it's just unbelievable. What I'm doing is I'm clipping the little tips, and everywhere I clip, there'll be new buds that will form, and little branches will come out, and it'll make this ring thicker. I started this several months ago, and you can see it's already taking a nice shape. What's great about pruning plants is that many of them really take the knife quite well. What I mean by that is by shearing them, you can create all kinds of interesting shapes and forms. I was at the Chicago Botanic Garden recently, where I saw a bonsai expert craft young trees into fantastic forms. Some of them look very old.
Any woody plant can become a bonsai if it can look convincing as a tree in a pot. For example, this tiny little Chinese elm here, compare this to the size of the leaf on the elms that we have on our streets. Mm-hmm. But you can see that these are much smaller. They're about, I don't know, what would you say, size of a...
Tiny little mouse ear.
Yeah, tiny little mouse ear. Mouse ear is a key for us in bonsai. You didn't know that before you said that, but when we store the trees for winter, in spring we get very, very anxious to get the trees back out and get working on them, and oftentimes people do it too early. So our key up here up north is to wait until, oddly enough, the oak trees in our neighborhood begin to put out leaves that are the size of a mouse's ear. Part of this is our art, our skill. I have a colleague who says bonsai is theater, and I think there's a great deal of truth to that. It's not a complete misrepresentation, but it's a slight misrepresentation to tell a story. The purpose of these trees as a form of art is to evoke in the mind of the viewer a sense of an ideal tree.
I see, an archetypal tree.
An archetypal tree, or tree that they've known somewhere, somehow, either in imagination or in memory, in reality, that they've encountered. That's the purpose.
From the ancient art of bonsai to that of stonemasons, we'll check in and see how I'm using stone on my latest garden project right after this. Welcome back. You know, I was fascinated earlier when John was talking about how in the Japanese garden at the Chicago Botanic Garden, they were sculpting the shrubs to emulate or symbolize mountains or large stones. I really love the use of symbolism in landscape design. I've always liked using natural materials that blend into the landscape in my gardens. And in my part of the country, you can hardly dig a hole without finding rocks. When I started to build out on my new property, I wanted dry stack stone walls made from locally sourced stones. The gatehouses on the property needed to match these fences, so I turned to my friend Butch Bennett of Bennett Brothers Stone in Hot Springs Village, Arkansas, for advice on which stone we should use. Hey Butch!
Hey Alan.
Good to see you. Sorry I'm running a little late.
Good to see you, no problem.
I'm here to pick out a little bit of stone and need some help.
All right. This is one of them that I had in mind.
Gosh, that's beautiful.
Thank you.
Well, look at this formation on the outer edge. That's interesting.
What I wanted to point out about it's the texture and also the consistent thickness of it. Comes out of the ground, unprocessed, consistent thickness.
Right, now this marking that I see on here, this looks like it's almost a fossil.
Yeah, it's a sedimentary stone.
So this formation would have been created a million years ago.
Yeah, or more. Yeah.
Well, gosh, it's really good looking. So Butch, is this stone, this piece we have here, essentially the same as these larger ones here on the palette?
They're quite similar, just different texture. And these are larger pieces. These come out in larger pieces.
So you're thinking this larger scale is probably going to be better for those little buildings?
I think this will fit your buildings better.
Right.
The size of it.
Yeah. Now, Tell me about the origin of these stones. About how far away did they come from?
Both are within 80, 90 miles. The quarries are fairly close together.
Yeah, so it's basically an indigenous stone.
Yes.
I see a lot of iron oxide, I guess it's iron oxide, on the face of some of these stones. Others don't have it. We're going to paint the buildings. Do you think that'll come through at all?
I don't think it'll be a problem. If anything, it'll probably enhance it a little bit.
Yeah, give it a nice sort of old world patina. I have to say, as a designer, I get really excited about stone because you can create so many different moods and effects with it.
Exactly. But now this is just one that I want to show you. Let's go look at some more.
Okay, great. Isn't this one of the stones that we used in a garden several years ago?
Yes, it is. That's the Pennsylvania bluestone. It's a very big seller here.
Right, we used that at the Worthens for the back garden.
Exactly.
And we had the geometric pattern, then we put that little pool in the center.
Right,
It
exactly.
turned out
I remember
beautifully.
it well, yeah.
Now, Butch, this is a good looking stone here.
Yeah, it's funny you should say that, Alan. This is the same stone that we've been looking at, just processed a different way.
Really? So the one we just saw, this is, it looks softer.
Yeah, it's been run through a tumbling process. The stones tumble against themselves and around the edges and actually knock some of the color off the faces also. It changes the appearance.
Yeah, so it looks more like a gathered field stone rather than a quarried stone.
Exactly.
You know, what I like so much about stone is that it is natural and thereby fits very comfortably in the landscape.
Exactly. And by the way, I've got another stone that I want to show you down here.
Okay.
For your project.
Sure, let's take a look.
Okay, Alan, here's a nice gray stone I want you to look at simply for the color.
Well, that is beautiful. It is a nice cool gray. Now, this looks familiar. We've used this before on a project, I think, haven't we?
Over to, I think, the Trinity Church.
Oh, right, absolutely. Yeah, we used it as a wall stone.
Right.
You know, Butch, I like the shape of these blocks. I mean, they're really, really good looking. They'll stack up nicely. I'm just thinking, though, that tan stone that had the tumbled edge might be the better choice, particularly since we're going to paint it. What do you think?
I think you're the boss, Alan. We'll write up the order for the brown and we'll get it done.
That sounds great. All right, it's time for viewer mail. Today, I've got a letter from Joan in New Jersey. She writes, Alan, I live on a street with a lot of traffic. And so sometimes it's distracting when I'm trying to relax or just have some fun in my backyard. Any ideas on bringing the focus back to my garden and not on my neighbors' SUVs? Well, I have a similar problem. I live in an urban situation with a lot of traffic, Joan, and there are some design tips that you can follow that can help bring the noise level down or at least try to keep the focus away from it. Now let's talk about walls first. They seem like an obvious solution, but they really can work. There are lots of different materials to choose from, like that beautiful stone we just saw earlier with Butch, or traditional brick, or even wood fencing. Now, the brick walls worked well in this home because it blended in with the home's architecture, and the difference it made was really quite dramatic. Curbing the street noise allowed the family to create an inviting backyard oasis for entertaining. Now, if you don't have the budget for a stone or brick wall, you might think about doing some sort of green screening. For one client, we used an Arborvitae screen to separate this garden from its high-rise neighbors, providing both privacy and noise control. In my own garden, I've used a clipped holly hedge around my fountain garden to enclose the space. It's also one of the quietest spots in the garden. And it's not just because the hedges help with the noise, but the water in the fountain helps to drown out the urban chaos as well. Now, one last example, in another garden, I worked with a water feature company to design a large waterfall. It's not only the focal point of the backyard, but the water cascading down is a soothing contrast to the nearby street. I hate for you to wear earplugs in your own backyard, so give some of those ideas a try. All right, now let's turn our attention to food. Now, this show is about Japanese influences, so we'll visit the Viking cooking school for an Asian-inspired dish that's prepared on the grill. The sizzling details next. Hi, welcome back. Well, we're continuing our theme of Japanese influences, and I'm here in Greenwood, Mississippi at the Viking Cooking School, where Elizabeth Haskell is going to show us how to create some delicious asparagus using a sesame ginger dipping sauce. Go on inside.
Summer is a wonderful time to serve asparagus. It's also a great time to pull out your grill. So today we're going to combine both of those aspects. We're going to be serving grilled asparagus with a sesame ginger dipping sauce. So to begin, we'll start with Japanese mayonnaise. Japanese mayonnaise has a little bit more egg yolk than our traditional mayonnaise. It also has less oil, so it does have a little bit of a richer flavor. And now we're going to add a 1/4 cup of the Japanese mayonnaise. This is going to really give it a velvety texture. We're also going to add 3 tablespoons of red miso paste. That's a soybean paste that's very common in Asian dishes. We also have a tablespoon of fresh grated ginger, and another tablespoon of yellow onion, and 2 teaspoons of lemon juice. And then we'll go ahead and pick up our whisk and add our sesame oil. Okay. Now we'll go ahead and take our asparagus to the grill. One of the ways to prevent sticking and burning is we're going to go ahead and toss this with a little bit of olive oil. You can do this in a bowl, but I find it's much easier if you lay them out. That way you can coat evenly all of your asparagus spears. So we'll go ahead and lay these on our grill. The grill is at medium-high. They will turn bright green, and that color is so beautiful, you don't want to overcook them. Once these have been grilled, you can put them on your platter and then sprinkle them with a little toasted sesame seed. So as you can see, this dish is absolutely wonderful for your summer entertaining.
In this garden I dream of a bed of flowers. Bluebirds sing of the beauty all around us. And every time the sun comes out, I can't help but smile. Oh, no, I can't help but smile.